This is a continuation of our videos on sculpture. We're going to take a look at portraits. We've already talked about portraits in general as a way of keeping the dead alive in memory, and that was something started early on with the wax death mask, typically made while the person was still alive and at a time when they achieved a certain position of status in society. This would have been a man, so this mask could be worn in a funeral procession for the person by actors that would stand in as surrogates for the family's male ancestors. And then they were kept in a special cupboard in the reception room of the house of this elite member of society. So it's going to immortalize their status and again reflect the importance of genealogy in Roman culture. This image here, though, is showing you Caesar. So already at the time of the Republic, this invention of the bust, a head detached from the body, is something that we see happening in Roman society. This one is showing an image of Caesar very similar to what we would have seen on his coins. And in the Republic, it would have been someone who is male and someone of elite status that we would see a portrait being created. The head of the old man on the other side was also during the Republic period, and it shows you the very veristic style of portraiture, utterly realistic portraiture of men of distinguished families. This would have been the norm, and it very much carried on the tradition of the wax death mask, capturing all of the naturalistic details and making a statement about personality. So it says this person was serious and determined, someone who was experienced, someone loyal to family and state. By the end of the 1st century, you start to see images of other members of society. So this female portrait is more of a display of wealth. This is something that is also showing Republican virtues, not really idealized beauty. They are also showing contemporary fashion in this image. So we're not looking at a reflection of some sort of goddess in the way that she was dressed or her hairstyle. This would have been a popular Flavian hairstyle of a woman of high society at this time. Women were more involved in society than what we would have seen in the Athenian society. They were out in public, involved in law and politics. So it's a very different kind of reference to women that we start to see even during the end of the Republic period in Roman portraiture. Of course, portraits of the emperor would be very, very important. So here we have Augustus as a general and emperor, our first emperor. Portraits like this would be found in towns throughout the empire, in forums and baths, basilicas, in markets. And this is showing you Augustus as a general addressing his troops. So probably modeled on the style of Doryphorus. You can see that in his stance, a bit of contrapposto. So we're still reflecting a taste that shows reference to the Greek classical era. And it's a likeness of him, but still somewhat idealized. And we will see Augustus retaining his youth throughout his portraiture. So this idea of role-playing, of making a portrait that might show different kinds of roles in society, was something that would be not only for the imperial emperor, but also for wives and daughters of the emperor. So sometimes a personification as a goddess would appear in portraiture. And there's multiple levels of iconography within this sculpture. He is, of course, with his hand raised as if he is addressing his troops. And then there's all kinds of relief on his cuirass, this bodice that he would wear in the attire as a general. But the iconography shows things like Mother Earth at the top and a canopy up above, things that show that reference to territorial conquests, but then also that the whole Roman territory is under the protection of the gods. Other gods show that Augustus is a bringer of peace, that the gods are on his side. There's a detail here of one of the Parthians returning their standards, something that would be a major event in a war, to lose your standards. So here the standards are being returned to him. And then also, as you look at other details, Cupid is there. That figure of Cupid is seated on a dolphin. That may be a reference to his naval victory over Mark Antony, something that came just before his rise to emperor. And then the image of Cupid alludes to his divine descent. So if you remember, Caesar adopted Augustus, and Caesar, the Julian line, traced their descent from the gods. So all kinds of iconography wrapped into this image of the portrait of Augustus. When we move into the High Empire, this is the time when the empire is at its greatest geographic extent, and you have citizens enjoying all kinds of luxury and prosperity. This is an image of Hadrian, one of the emperors under the High Empire, and there are more portraits of Hadrian than any other emperor other than Augustus. He was a lover of the arts, and he was still turning to classical statues of Greek officials as reference for the kind of portraiture that he created. He was the first to wear a beard, and it was probably a Greek affectation, but then that trend that he started in his portraiture is something that would continue for emperors for over the next century. We look at here Marcus Aurelius, and this style of portraiture is new. You have the equestrian monument. So this is a Roman invention, showing the emperor astride a horse, and the man is even larger than he should be in relationship to the horse. Again, he's wearing a beard, somewhat here more in the convention of a philosopher, and that's a reference to Marcus Aurelius and his personality and the kind of writings that he did. He was someone who wrote this book of Meditations, which was a philosophical treatise on his view of the world. So here he is, this gesture possibly of clemency. There's some evidence that there may have been some sort of victim here at the feet of the horse, where someone is cowering and he's giving him clemency, and lots of other organic details in the muscles of the horse, veins. You got lots of naturalistic qualities in this bronze. And this was made towards the end of his reign, and he was allowing very truthful portraits to be made, so even showing some of the weariness that he was experiencing at the end of his reign. With the late empire, you have power in the Roman Empire beginning to decline. It's a lot more difficult at this point to maintain borders, and you even have things like Eastern cults, new ideas with religion starting to compete with the state religion. So here, this is showing you one of the late empire rulers. This is Caracalla. He was someone who tended to be rather brutal, and in this portrait, it shows also the kind of suspicion that he reigned with. So it's also showing some of the introspection that we saw with Marcus Aurelius. When Caracalla succeeded his father, he had his brother murdered and then had the Senate damn his memory. So even in some of the painted family portraits that we find of his father, along with his younger brother, he had his younger brother's face erased. So this wiping away of the memory of him, of a political rival, is something that we see with the reign of Caracalla. And Caracalla would be assassinated in just the 6th year of his rule. This is followed by the soldier emperors, a time when you have almost continuous civil war in the 3rd century. So instead of having ambitious building projects, you have defensive walls being put up for protection. And you have a time when general after general might be declared emperor, only to be murdered by another general just a few years or months later. So things like coins would have careful new portraits put on for whoever was in power, whoever the current emperor would be. And portraits like this, of course, would be important for asserting authority for whatever time the emperor might be in control. So you have on one hand something like this that can assert authority, this image of this heroic general, heroic nudity being displayed, but also emotional conflict that he was experiencing. There's a certain element of nervousness on the face of this general who had become emperor but would be succeeded shortly after his rise to power. And at this time, you also have emperors even declining cremation and opting for burial. So this was a sarcophagus that was believed to be created for the son of one of the emperors. And it's just interesting to see the chaos of battle that is displayed on this sarcophagus. Intensely emotional, and we've lost the illusion of space that we would have seen in the classical style of Greek sculpture, and the sort of order that we've seen in the last lecture of Bacchus and the Four Seasons. This is something that is showing classical order declining in the art that's being created at this time of decline in the empire. And so our last portrait to look at is of Constantine. So this is the New Rome. This is after the Tetrarchy, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next chapter. And this colossal portrait was made by Constantine for his Basilica Novel. He is enthroned in this statue. It is something that was created after his defeat of Maxentius and the changeover from the Tetrarchy to single rule. And it is reviving some of that Augustan idea of eternally youthful portraiture. So no longer do you see the beard. He looks youthful, and of course it's incredible in scale. The head alone was 8 feet in height, and this was modeled after an image of Jupiter. So again, turning to one of their gods. Part statue, as far as the arms and the head being done in marble, but then the core of the statue was done in brick with a wooden torso covered in bronze, and in his hand he was holding an orb of the world of power, kind of like Jupiter would be enthroned. So everything about this was making a statement about his single rule, but at the same time there's an element of personality being lost because of the scale of this portrait. And there's something in these very large, wide staring eyes that make him seem a little bit aloof, as if he is not looking to anything in this world but something beyond. And we'll talk a little bit more about Constantine, of course, in the next chapter.